Welcome to the Ideagen UK Global Goals 2030 Summit. Today is especially exciting as we have a series of incredible global leaders and luminaries, starting with Microsoft's Shaloo, Garg, and Matt Hellman. Welcome.
Thanks, George, and thanks so much for having us. We are so excited to be here. I'm Matt Hellman. I am the strategy and operations leader for AI and sustainability at Microsoft. I work for the VP of AI and sustainability, leading our strategy and operations, building the path for Microsoft's acceleration of AI and cloud in the United States. I also lead our sustainability practice and program to become carbon negative by 2030. A lot of press and news has come about that, so I'm happy to talk about that some other time. But we have a big focus on water, waste, carbon, and biodiversity. And in this role, I am really helping to define Microsoft's AI sustainability strategy, go to market, driving the partnerships and innovation and ecosystem activation to help us achieve our ambitious goals. In addition to that, I'm also helping to lead our social entrepreneurship program. And that is the setting for our topic of discussion today. So with me today, I'm excited to have Shaloo Garg, who's the managing director of Microsoft Startups and the global lead for the social entrepreneurship program. So welcome, Shaloo.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to the Ideagen Summit. Really excited to be here. My name is Shaloo Garg, and I am part of the Microsoft for Startups team based here in San Francisco. I lead the global effort around our social entrepreneurship program, which is super fabulous, which we're going to talk to you about today. And then in addition, I also work closely with startups here in Silicon Valley, just making sure that they have enough business value proposition and sales acceleration from Microsoft. Really excited to be here.
Awesome. So, Shaloo, why don't we start off by sharing a little bit about what social entrepreneurship is and what some of the key attributes are? Would love your
Yeah,
perspective.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, if for any one of you who are in the startup space, there is always this nomenclature debate around what contributes or what constitutes a social entrepreneur. And there are certain attributes that we look at. One is the business model of the startup. Is the key KPI impacting community, society, or economy? So let's say if there is a startup out there that's building a solution, a customized solution for a chemotherapy patient. If you take that versus a startup who's building a solution for clean water for a local sized community, which could be applicable to a global subset of communities as well. And so if you compare these two solutions, the first startup is a mainstream healthcare startup, which probably is leveraging AI to do what they're doing, whereas the latter startup is more social impact. So what really constitutes a social entrepreneur is their ability to impact community, society, or economy. And I have to tell you, Matt, I mean, living here in the Valley, we often see big headlines of Series A and seed stage and Series B, going up to 27 million, 42 million, so on and so forth, closing rounds. Oftentimes, we get into this habit of comparing mainstream versus social impact, right? And that's where we draw the difference that the social entrepreneur's business may not be a big ticket item as a mainstream business, but they have a rippling effect on the economy, community, society, something that's really not tangible in terms of dollars. But when you look at the broad facet of what level of impact they make in the community, that's phenomenal. That's huge. And so that is the nomenclature we tend to follow when it comes to social entrepreneurs.
Awesome. I think one of the other things that I absolutely love about social entrepreneurship and social enterprises more broadly is, I mean, these are organizations that are really trying to address, basic unmet needs or solving for some of the social and environmental problems, as you just said, through a market-driven approach, right? And I think that's one of the key differentiators from just a typical enterprise or for other organizations that are measuring, success based off of profit, revenue. They're really trying to, drive success through other metrics as well, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the things I'd love to know is, tell me a little bit more about your personal journey, right? Like would love to know, how you've been involved with startups, why are, social entrepreneurs specifically important for you and the work you're doing?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because oftentimes when I meet founders for the first time, that's usually the first question I ask them, which is, what's your story? Talk to me about it. What's been your life's journey that's gotten you to this point? And so let me share a little bit about my personal journey. I grew up in Middle East. My dad was a nautical engineer, and at that time, he was building all these cool planes, 747, etc. And so I was literally traveling my entire school year. So think of like I literally had I had to change 7 schools just from my elementary to my high school. And I remember right when I was in middle school, my neighbor was my best friend. And so, anytime I would come back from school, I would just go to her house and we would play and then come back. And I noticed while growing up that she was never going to school, whereas older brothers were coming in the school bus with me. And that always bothered me. I was actually very jealous. I was like, gosh, why do I have to study and I have to give these exams, and she gets to just stay at home and have fun and play. It's later in my life I understood that it was the stigma in the community and the society that did not allow her to go to school. And so when I understood the rationale, it really, really bothered me every single day. It was almost like, why is she not allowed? Like, what is the reason for it? And then when I went on to do my MBA at that time, which was ages ago, not too long ago, but still, but still, I remember taking up one of the electives of technology, and I started studying the realm and how technology works, and I was like, gosh, like this could easily solve the problem where when a girl is not allowed to go to school, technology can bring school to her at her home. And so one thing led to another. Of course, I've spent almost 2 decades in the tech industry and now working at Microsoft. And so for me, it is extremely critical to understand how can we leverage technology as a strongest enabler to address our community, society, or economic problems. And I got to tell you, Matt, we have not even just capitalized on 10, barely like 10 to 15% of the opportunity that's out there. It's phenomenal. And so for me, that's been my journey. And of course, I've been engaged with the United Nations, with Gates Foundation, just pro bono work, getting most of this stuff out. And when I joined Microsoft, which has phenomenal culture, we talk about growth mindset, we talk about diversity and inclusion, our cultural values. This was one of the first things that came to mind is we as a company we have access to technology, we have access to resources, we have access to markets, we have access to tools and processes that probably some of the companies don't even have. And so I put two and two together. I stuck to the goal and I said, we got to bring the social entrepreneurs, the folks who are actually doing this amazing stuff in close proximity to a company like Microsoft and build a program that's scalable globally. So it's not like one off, we are doing it in one market and we are not doing in the other. We wanted it to be a global program and sort of an equal enabler for all the markets globally. And so that's been my journey throughout. And we announced the program earlier this year, which I know we're going to get into later in the conversation. But yeah, that's been the journey so far.
I love that. You talk about diversity and inclusion. I mean, I'm so inspired by the work that we're doing at Microsoft around
Yeah.
diversity and inclusion. I know it's a buzzword these days. What does that mean to you, and how do you think diversity and inclusion is so important, and how does social entrepreneurship play into that?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I think this whole concept of diversity and inclusion is overhyped, to a large extent abused
Hmm.
in many respects, right? So it's almost like every conference you attend, every conversation you have, it's all about, hey, let's say in my world of startups, right, access to capital is the number one issue for female founders. And so constantly we're just harping on this that, hey, the female founders don't have access to capital. I think the buck doesn't stop there. There is a larger conversation, which is great. So if there is access to capital, what about support and infrastructure? Who is supporting and providing infrastructure to these female founders? Is it big corporates like Microsoft? Is it events driven by one female speaking to another and giving some cool advice? So I think there's a lot to be done. I got to tell you, while we were building this program, Global Social Entrepreneurship, one of the key KPIs that we have put out there is we will absolutely deliberately look at the business models based on, of course, their impact that they're making in the community, but also consider female and underrepresented founders. And it's almost like we know that it's a good thing to do, but
Mhm.
it's a reminder for us constantly when we see it on the dartboard to say, guys, like, if this is our portfolio size, what percentage have we attributed or have we contributed to female founders and underrepresented founders? So back to your question, super critical topic, lot of talk, very little walk, right?
Mhm.
And I think we need to get past this access to capital or pipeline issue or what have you, and really start building frameworks that actually deliver on helping the female founders.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think especially when, the statistics, I believe, say that, when you have boards or organizations that are made up of, more diverse individuals, whether it's women, people of color, members of the LGBTQ community,
Yeah,
they're like 25%, more successful than just organizations that don't have that same level of diversity. And I think also the inclusion piece is so important too, right? You can have a
yeah,
board organization made up of, different types of people, but, it's so different when you don't actually include them in the process. You don't include them in building out the products, and you don't include them in how you go to market as well. So, I mean, I think it's super interesting.
yeah.
Awesome. So another one, I mean, I think very specific. I mean, it's very much tied to that one as well. But I love, to hear your thinking on the role of social entrepreneurship in supporting like women's empowerment, more
Yeah.
specifically, perhaps some of your own experiences, with that.
Yeah, so women's empowerment, like female founders that as we just discussed, is another widely discussed topic.
Yeah.
And the the topic of women's empowerment actually starts from a very early age in the life cycle for a woman, right? It's actually starts when that woman, that specific woman, is a young girl. So then we need to, I always say that, when we look at the life cycle of young women and girls, education sort of forms the baseline. So when we talk about women's empowerment, we cannot just go rah-rah about, hey, we got to do the best for the women out there. The number one question we got to ask ourselves is, are we providing enough education guidelines
Mhm.
to young girls? Do the young girls have the right healthcare they need? Over a number of years, we have seen teenage pregnancies in developing economies grow atrociously,
Yeah.
right? Where is that number coming from? That number should be going significantly down, and our world is going in the opposite direction. That number is rising with every single year, right? We see a lot of young girls getting married at very early age, as early as 11 years.
Mhm.
And so there's a campaign out there that says girls, not brides, which really focuses on, let the girls study and let's not just get them in the cycle of life where they have so much to learn. I got to share with you, Matt. Of course, we are in the times of COVID here. I was looking at some stats from UNICEF last week, and around 300 million girls are out of school because of COVID. And I know
Wow.
we are fortunate. We live in developed country, and we're very fortunate to have online schooling. But there
Yeah.
are a lot of young girls there who do not even have access to physical school, and now let alone digital school. So the
Yeah.
impact is phenomenal in terms of, you're literally giving 3 to 6 months break in the cycle. So
Yeah.
now we are talking about women's empowerment. Unless we have a strong foundation of a young girl who is really respected and who's given us who's given her space while growing up, that woman cannot be empowered, right? So again, I always encourage, let's not just focus on, there's a grown up woman here and what we can do for her. I think it's the entire life cycle of a girl to understand her education, her healthcare. After that, while growing up, what are the economic opportunities for her early on? For example, there's this very cool startup that I'm working with. They're building a blockchain app for girls in rural villages, where most of the girls are dependent on their dads or their brothers to open a bank account. Now, almost everyone has a cell phone. She can go online, use that app, and get access to a bank account. And so, again, women's empowerment, huge. And all these attributes or all these facets of the society that I just talked about, that adds up to women's empowerment. If we do our jobs right as a community, women will be empowered eventually, right? But we got to get that process right. We got to get that foundation right.
Totally. So you just brought up COVID, and I mean, I think it's the biggest thing impacting our world right now, obviously. And would love to know how, from your perspective, COVID is impacting your work with startups and the startup
Yeah,
community. Obviously, it's taking a devastating toll on women,
yeah.
startup entrepreneurs, as you just mentioned. But would love to know your thinking, and I know we've talked a lot about it as well with some of
Yeah.
our work for stuff, but would love to hear your thinking.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Matt, one thing that I love about my job, and it drives me every single day, are these just getting exposed to these new cool ideas that are out there.
Yeah,
And it's not always perfect, right? Some of them come in literally conception stage that, hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you think about this? Or it's a further developed product or plan. And so there are some really cool use cases that are out there. Just to mention a couple, actually, one is in pure stealth mode. So unfortunately, I cannot name the startup, but it's based here in Valley, in San Francisco, and they're actually building sort of an X-ray scanner. Now, of course, if for lungs, if you're detected or if you're tested positive for COVID, and if it's gotten to a really worse stage, you have to go through some X-rays. But what this startup is doing is using some IoT sensors on the body. It can actually predict the condition of your lungs, and it has these three parameters, which is red, yellow, and green. And green is like you're doing okay, you're out of danger sign. Yellow is you're getting there. And so some phenomenal work. They're using some AI, some machine learning in there. I believe they're planning to announce their business model in July or August sometime soon. So yeah, I mean, look, this is the time of a social entrepreneur, right? If we are not recognizing that social entrepreneurs are important for our community as a whole, then there couldn't be any better time. And this is it. This is where you see the best models that are coming out there to support the community as a whole.
totally. And I think, what's interesting to raise as well is, you and I have talked a lot about this and how we're working with our customers. But I think the pulse, I hear from our customers is, obviously these are crazy times. Their business model is being turned on its head. I know
Yeah,
we're currently working with, a company, grocery store company, and they're trying to figure out how do they keep, food fresher longer on the shelves? How do they make sure that the supply chains are continuing to operate, better than normal, and to create consistency and reliability? And then at the same time, they're also devoting their time, energy, and resources to thinking about broader systems, change, right? So, I mean, I
yeah,
know one of the things that they keep bringing up is how do we reduce hunger? How do we reduce waste?
yeah,
And those are, back to our definition earlier in the day. I mean, thinking about those basic unmet needs and solving for, social, environmental, human rights, level problems, with a market driven approach. I mean, this is, exactly as you said, the perfect time for us to be engaging with social entrepreneurs. And I know we're looking for some right now, but I
yeah.
mean, such an exciting time for, I think, social entrepreneurs, such an exciting time for even, society, the United States, to help try and solve some of these problems that have been plaguing us for even longer periods of time, and maybe COVID is that kind of moment where we
Yeah.
ultimately help to put pressure on solving for some of those problems. And
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of things that I want to call out here. One is the customer angle, right? And then there is a social entrepreneur, and then we'll connect both. This is where Microsoft comes in. So
yeah,
let's look at the customer space, right? We've been talking about digital transformation for how many years? More than a decade, right?
right.
We've been constantly been talking about digitally transforming customers. At one point, the conversation was how do you get the on-prem hardware customers to cloud? That was called digitally transforming a customer, right? Then there was a conversation, all right, so the customer is on cloud. How do you sort of bring that robust act where you're providing data analytics, big data, AI, machine learning, right? That was another phase of digital transformation. Matt, I think we are in a brand new wave of digital transformation, which none of us even know what it looks like. We're predicting, we're using predictive models, right? Let's just say up until like 2 months ago or 3 months ago, before COVID hit us, there were some industries which were doing really awesome, right? And they were not even expecting disruption in the industry because they were doing so well. Now look at how it's changed. Like I'll give you an example: transportation, aviation industry, right? Hospitality industry. Look at the numbers, huge dip. But the industries that have hugely benefited from this, look at industrial manufacturing, supply chain, right? And so the entire definition of how the customers themselves are looking at it is super interesting. And then Microsoft as a company, we always engage with customers, and it's fascinating to see how quickly they are thinking about, to your example, a retailer, right? For them, it's no longer about brick and mortar, right? They cannot stick to the model that, hey, somebody is going to come to my shop and do their grocery shopping and go away. Obviously, it's more about how do I get more feet on the ground to cater to as mass market as possible. And so that's one part of it. The second part that I want to tie this into the social impact angle is social entrepreneurs have a phenomenal opportunity to take their business model to customers, right? Startups are faster, they're cheaper, they're agile, they're easy to pivot. So, in the middle of all this massive disruption that's happening right now and expected to happen in the next 6 to 9 months, or possibly even for another year or two, that's where startups come in. Phenomenal opportunity for really good business models to make an impact for customers. So rather than customer putting in millions of dollars out there, they can look to these startups. The fascinating part about Microsoft Global Social Entrepreneurship is we provide access to customers for social entrepreneurs, and we look at it from two angles. Angle number one is when we partner up with organizations like you mentioned, retailer, right? There's another organization that I'm working with in Europe who's actually building a sustainability practice in the community, and they're changing their entire retail business model, how they go to market. And this is one of the Fortune 500 companies. So one model is, we are working with these retailers and, the banks out there and so on and so forth. How can we help them address this business challenge leveraging startups? That's number one. The second angle is taking the portfolio of startups that we have and looking for opportunities in our customer base, how our startups can help solve these business problems for our own customers. And so I think it's a triage and it's a win-win. And as we say that every crisis brings an opportunity, and this is that massive inflection point where where the next opportunity is going to come up.
totally. So when we think about the total landscape and opportunity for startups, obviously this is one of those moments. What are some of the
Yeah.
leadership traits that we can take from some crises like this, and then also just important leadership traits as a startup working with a big corporation to solve for some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So the data that's COVID related is sort of scattered at this point, but just to set perspective, obviously before launching the Global Social Entrepreneurship Program, we went really deep and did our due diligence in certain spectrums, like what is the market appetite? Is there enough hunger in the market, right? That's the first pillar. Second is, what do social entrepreneurs really need? That was the second part of due diligence. And third is, how can Microsoft help these social entrepreneurs be successful? So let me take the first part first, which is really what is the market appetite? So I'll set some numbers here. We went back to 2006 relating to data on social impact. That was in United Nations, World Health Organization. I mean, there was tons of sources. McKinsey was one of them. We looked at tons of resources. And just to set perspective here, in 2019, the total investment, and this is the capital investment by venture capitalists that went in social impact space, was about $2.9 billion, which is not a big ticket item when we could look at it from a mainstream perspective. But for this space, it's huge. And then we ran the same numbers, 6 months later, and the number had already hit 2.10 billion. So obviously there's enough appetite. If the capital is going in the market, that means somebody is eating that. That means there is enough deal flow in the market. And so there was total addressable market size. The second was, what do social entrepreneurs need? I mean, it came out clearly. They need sales acceleration. They need fantastic technology. They need access to community, right? So a startup sitting in Israel wants, their key market is New York City and San Francisco. How do they interact with, key ecosystem players in New York City and San Francisco? And so that is the model that we have built in terms of just closing the gaps when it comes to social impact and customers as well.
Awesome. So I know you've talked a lot about it, but tell me
Mhm.
what you think the true role of technology is for companies like Microsoft in supporting social entrepreneurs.
In my view, technology is the strongest catalyst for change. No matter how much fancy your business model is,
Mm-hmm.
if you're not using technology in the right way, you're pretty much calling your doomsday pretty soon, right? And so Microsoft is uniquely positioned from many spectrums. First is amazing technology in terms of Azure cloud infrastructure, GitHub. There's just tons of goodness there. Visual Studio, Microsoft Office, I mean, so on and so forth. And that's one of the things that we provide to our social entrepreneurs as well, which is roughly about up to 120,000 free Azure cloud credits, along with GitHub premium offer every month. And so technology is huge, right? I mean, we do billions of dollars business with customers.
Right.
And for social impact, this is a tiny drop, right? But for them, for social entrepreneurs, it's huge, it's phenomenal. So that's pillar number one. Pillar number two, why we are uniquely positioned to do this is by de facto, we have the strongest customer base, right, in the enterprise space. So when we talk of Fortune 100 companies, I think the last stat that I saw, majority of them run Microsoft in some aspect or the other. And so, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, one of the things that we are doing is providing these social entrepreneurs access to those
Mm-hmm.
customers. And so that's pillar number two, right? That's where every startup, that's access to customers is holy grail for any startup. And so we are doing that. The third pillar is where Microsoft Philanthropies organization comes in. They are providing access to grants to social entrepreneurs in the field of sustainability, skills and employability, and accessibility. And so that's where the power of Microsoft comes in. And look, I got to share this experience with you. Last year, when all the teams came together and we were like, look, I still remember that conference room in Redmond. It was a teeny weeny conference room with a lot of people. It had a whiteboard, so that was good. But
Yeah.
we were whiteboarding and we were like, on the left side of the whiteboard, we were like, what do social entrepreneurs need? And then on
Yeah.
the right side, we had, how can Microsoft help them? And we
Mm-hmm.
almost saw that, look, this is not rocket science. All we are doing is really connecting the opportunity here to what we already have. And if we can make that happen, let's go chase it. Let's go get these social entrepreneurs and let's help them be successful via Microsoft technology, access to customers and grants. And so that was the thought process that went into it.
I love it.
And the
And thus,
whiteboard, of course.
yeah, and the whiteboard. As you say, and thus the program was born. I love it.
Yes.
So awesome. I'd love to know additional value that Microsoft sees from working with startups. I mean, I know more broadly we have a point of view, but then also specifically social entrepreneurship has been a passion project for Jean-Philippe Courtois, who's the executive vice president for global sales and marketing. And I think there's this big tie-in with our mission. Would love to hear your thoughts in terms of how it all comes together, the value we see, and
Yeah.
how it is so important now more than ever.
Yeah, so we've been extremely fortunate to have top leadership supporting social entrepreneurship, like Jean-Philippe himself. He's one of the executives, and I love what he says. He says, let's help social entrepreneurs who really make an impact do good globally via technology. And I love that operative word, do good globally, right? So there is no sort of hidden agenda. It's basically we are providing access to technology, right? And we are enabling these startups to do well. And so, in the broad scheme of things, when we look at Microsoft's cultural values, we're constantly talking about using technology as an enabler to not only do good in the social impact space, but even for our customers. And what this initiative really does is brings initiatives like AI for good, sustainability, you talked about it. And of course, you are heavily engaged on the sustainability side as well. Tech for good, nonprofit NGOs. It just brings the gamut of the initiatives and the narratives that we have at a company level under this umbrella of global social entrepreneurship. And what it really does is puts Microsoft in touch with this raw innovation that's happening at the ground level, right? The business models that are still super, super small compared to those big enterprises, but they're pretty darn good, right? They have huge potential of growing into tomorrow's enterprise companies. And what we're doing is we're working with them really early on and enabling them and helping them to do good globally so that
Mhm.
tomorrow when they do go on to become successful businesses, they have had the support from Microsoft for the longest time.
Yeah. Microsoft to me in so many ways is the biggest, social, enterprise that
Yeah.
exists out there. And so, I think with all of these great things that we're doing, the social entrepreneurship program is just one opportunity for us to accelerate a lot of those various
Yeah.
initiatives programs. So I think it's awesome. I love this program that you guys have created and I'm a part of and help to drive. I'd love
Yeah.
to hear more about some of the startups that you've been working with to help this program come alive, and
Yeah.
how have you given them a voice?
Gosh, how many minutes do I have? I can go on and on
That's right.
about that's again, I love that part of the job, which is really going out there and just talking to the founders. And it's sometimes I get goosebumps.
Yeah.
And some of the most successful businesses have come out from most powerful stories or painful personal stories, and it's amazing. So I'm in the fan club of many, many startups and cheerleaders for many, but I'll share with you a few that are just top of mind. The first one is actually based here in San Francisco. It's a company called Omniviz. Dr. Catherine Clayton, who I'm a big fan of, she is the CEO founder of Omniviz, and she has this amazing business model, which is they have a kit which they use to predict the outbreak of cholera. So
Mm.
cholera, which is even worse than COVID, and it's one of the deadliest diseases in the world. It's as bad as polio or malaria. And so what they do is using air or water where the pathogen is usually found, they're able to predict whether cholera is going to outbreak within 30 minutes, which is 240x times faster than gold standard. And
Mm.
so, what I love about Dr. Clayton's journey is, she actually grew up in developing countries. She
Mm.
lost quite a few family members to cholera. She went on to actually become a doctor, but she gave up her practice and she started a startup of her own because she was like, hey, I got to do something. I got to give back to the community. And so every time I get on a call with her, she's almost like a
Right.
motivation factor and constantly reminding that this is why our jobs are, so fulfilling because we're helping founders like these. She's also right now building testing kits for COVID-19. And her 3 to 5 year plan is actually building solutions to hopefully eradicate polio and malaria as well. So I'm a big fan of Dr. Clayton. There's another founder that's based in South Africa and Kenya. It's by the company's name is Zindi. That's Zindi, and there's this amazing lady, Selena. She's a CEO founder, and what she's doing is, going back to education, which we talked about earlier in our conversation. She's building a platform for her community,
Mm.
where her community can be coached on AI and machine learning. And so what she's doing is she's harboring and she's nurturing these future data scientists in that small community. And we love this as a company like
Yeah.
Microsoft. We love this because we are all about skills and employability. That's a huge initiative for the company. And so I love, once again, working with her. There's another gentleman in Sydney, and that's right up in your space of sustainability. The company's name is Seaben, and he's the founder's name is Pete Zelensky. Again, a huge fan of his, and he has this ocean mapping data sensors that literally put these IoT sensors in the ocean, and then he can actually predict, using the data, where there are maximum number of cigarette butts or trash, etc. So it's more around clean tech or cleaner oceans. So again, I can go on and on, but these are top of mind stories for folks who are really doing some really good stuff out there.
Awesome. Inspiring. I would love to know, how does Microsoft shift and change its culture around startups, right? I mean, there's so much innovation, so much
Yeah,
push to push the envelope in so many
yeah,
ways. I know that there's so much Microsoft can learn from it. I know that it's changed a lot of the ways that I work, right? Building out minimal viable products, testing things out with pilots, failing fast versus
yeah.
a ton of time, just spinning your wheels and spending a ton of money and then failing in the end. And then, you lose all this stuff too. How have you seen Microsoft's culture shift and change, as a result of some of these startups you guys have worked with?
Yeah, anytime I go out and I either do public speaking or I'm meeting with a founder or even a customer for that matter, I just position ourselves as we are a startup within an enterprise. We're
Yeah.
scrappy, right? We love to fail, but we fail fast. We pick ourselves up and get to work the very right moment. We don't like mull over it. Gosh, this has been like the worst day of my life. I cannot do anything else. So it's more around, how do we quickly pivot, right?
Yeah.
We know we have learned something from this. Let's move, right? What's the next best thing, or what can we do? We're extremely founder focused, and that's something that is extremely needed in a large company like Microsoft, because being inside the company, it's easily to get drawn into an enterprise culture, right? But we constantly remind ourselves that we are here for the founders. We are founder facing, right? We are startups facing. And so unless we in our mindset behave and culturally operate as a founder, as a startup, it's very difficult for us to relate to the world outside. And so that's one of the aspects that we constantly remind ourselves of. And the other thing I would say is culturally, every single time we are either building business plans or, our new fiscal year is beginning in the next couple of months, we're constantly putting this bullet on the dartboard, which is like a central bullet, which is founders first, right? Which is constantly training your brain muscle to think, how can I, as an individual, help a founder be successful? Because if I'm not doing that, then I'm not doing my job right. And so it's extremely important to culturally train your mind that you're there for a reason and it's purely for startups and to help them be successful.
I love it. So I'm bought in. If I'm a
Yeah,
startup, I get involved.
awesome. So you're bought in, right? You
I'm bought
should.
in. I'm down.
Okay. Okay. So a couple of ways. One is you can go to our landing page. It's startups.microsoft.com/social entrepreneurship. I know it's quite a mouthful there, but you can just Bing search Microsoft social entrepreneurship. That's an easy one, and it'll take you right there. It
Mhm.
has an FAQ. It has listing of our benefits that I just discussed about, and it also has an apply now icon. Matt, I hope you're listening since you've
Unless
got in. So that's one way. And then the other, of course, is Jean-Philippe had, if you'd like to learn a little bit more than what's out there, Jean-Philippe had written out a blog earlier this year, and I think it was published on Feb 21st. If you just Google search or Bing search that, that's another blog relating to how do we plan to operate in this market. It's super critical, and it goes deep into our methodology and our thought process as well.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about the criteria. What do I need to be? What do I have to have involved in my business model in
Yeah.
order to really fit into the program that Microsoft is building out?
Yeah, so two layers of qualification criteria. One is in terms of stage, anywhere from seed to Series E, C, I'm sorry, Series C, C as in cat, seed to Series C, less than $25 million in revenue, right? Less than 7 years in existence. And it's all there on the page. But the main thing, which I personally look for is this startup really social impact, right? The example that I gave you around chemotherapy planning for a cancer patient versus clean water, clearly the second startup is social impact. So we constantly ask ourselves, right, what is the key KPI, what is the business metric for this, and that's what we really zero in on.
Yeah, awesome. And let's say that I'm accepted into the program. What
Yeah.
kind of value can I get from the program working
Yeah,
with
so
Microsoft?
that's a great question. So technology, as I mentioned to you, right, in terms of access to Azure Cloud Credits, GitHub, so on and so forth. The second pillar is go-to-market and sales enablement, where our team works very closely to make sure the startups are groomed for enterprise customers.
Yeah,
And then the third pillar is a specialized offering for social entrepreneurs, which is access to grants, access to customers who have a C-suite commitment on sustainability and social impact. And then, of course, access to community as well.
awesome. I love it. Well, Shaloo, thank you so much for the time today. I always love talking to you about startups. I think we've got such a fantastic program. And I look forward to talking to many more of you. And I think Shaloo looks forward to talking to many more of you who are watching to see how we can get you involved. And if you know of any great startups that are doing fantastic work and would value and benefit working with Microsoft or have interest in this program, uh, hit us up on LinkedIn, shoot us a note over email, go to the website that Shaloo was just talking about, and get involved. We're excited to hear from you and to continue down this journey together. Shaloo, any
Yeah.
final remarks before we?
Yeah, a couple. Thank you, Matt. Firstly, I want to thank Ideagen for this opportunity. It's a fantastic platform to get the word out there. And thank you guys so much for believing in us, for helping us cascade the word out. Secondly, I would say if you're a social entrepreneur out there, look at us, talk to us. We want to talk to you. We want to know, we want to help you in your journey, whether you're COVID related or not. If you're doing something else, just reach out to us. We want to hear from you. For the audience there, hey, we're just getting started. It's a beautiful day here in San Francisco. We really hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you so much for the opportunity here.
For an incredible start to this incredible day, May 4th, 2020, for the Ideagen UK Global Goals 2030 Summit, powered by Azure, presented globally by Microsoft. Will continue shortly with a range of speakers, global leaders, and luminaries. And I don't know how much more we can get from this incredible start, but thank you both for this incredible inspiration. Again, Shaloo, how can folks learn more about what you're doing with this program?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can go to startups.microsoft.com/social entrepreneurship. But to make it simple, just Bing search Microsoft social entrepreneurship, and it's going to come up there, right there. Boom.
Boom. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Incredible start to this summit.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.